My brothers and my sisters, prayer is not just a whisper in the dark. It is not just a ritual performed out of duty. It is the lifeline between heaven and earth. It is the unseen cord that connects the fragility of human life with the infinite strength of God. When a person bows their head in prayer, they are not bowing in weakness. They are bowing in power, because in that very moment they are reaching beyond what the human eye can see. They are touching the throne of grace, and they are drawing strength from a source that never runs dry. We live in a world where human strength fails, where our minds become weary, where our bodies grow tired, where our hearts break under the weight of disappointment, betrayal, and loss. Yet when we open our mouths to pray, we step into a power that is greater than us, a power that transcends every limit and breaks every barrier. Prayer is the divine connection that transforms the weakness of man into the strength of God. It is the bridge that carries us from despair to hope, from fear to faith, from struggle to victory. Think about how fragile humanity really is. One phone call can change everything. One diagnosis can shake you to your core. One disappointment can leave you shattered on the floor. Human strength can only carry you so far. You can train your mind, you can discipline your body, you can focus your energy, but eventually the storms of life will come with such force that no human willpower can stand against them. This is where prayer becomes the key, because prayer plugs you into the eternal strength of God, and that strength does not fade, it does not weaken, it does not collapse under pressure. When you pray, you take your small and limited hands and place them into the great and unlimited hands of God. You exchange your weakness for His strength, your sorrow for His joy, your anxiety for His peace. It is through prayer that the broken vessel becomes whole. It is through prayer that the powerless find power. It is through prayer that the faint-hearted find courage. When Jesus walked the earth, He Himself demonstrated the power of prayer. The Son of God, clothed in human flesh, understood the necessity of staying connected to the Father through prayer. Before He chose His disciples, He prayed. Before He faced the cross, He prayed. In moments of great miracles and in moments of great agony, prayer was His anchor. If the very Son of God needed prayer to draw strength from His Father, how much more do we, fragile and finite as we are, need that same connection to sustain us? Prayer was never designed to be an emergency button pressed only in times of crisis. It was designed to be a continual lifeline, a daily exchange of weakness for strength, of humanity for divinity. Every time you kneel to pray, heaven leans in, and the Spirit of God begins to fill the empty spaces in your soul with divine power. Prayer does not eliminate the storms of life, but it equips you to endure them. It does not always change the situation, but it changes you in the midst of the situation. The reason some people crumble under the same weight that others carry with grace is not because the weight was different, but because one was carrying it alone while the other was carrying it with God's strength. Prayer does not make you superhuman, it makes you divinely sustained. It transforms your perspective so that you no longer see problems as walls, but as doors waiting to be opened by the hand of God. It transforms your spirit so that you are not crushed under adversity, but you stand taller because you know that you are not standing in your own power. It transforms your heart so that bitterness cannot take root, because the love of God floods in and drives out the poison of anger and resentment. Every battle you face is an opportunity for prayer to reveal its power. When fear rises up and tries to silence your faith, prayer is the weapon that dismantles it. When depression seeks to drown you in darkness, prayer is the light that pierces through. When anxiety seeks to strangle your peace, prayer releases a river of calm into your soul. The transformation does not come from repeating words or following formulas. The transformation comes from entering into communion with the God who is greater than every enemy, every disease, every failure, and every fear. In prayer, you step into His presence, and His presence changes everything. Your weakness is not a liability in prayer. It is the very place where God's strength is revealed, because His power is made perfect in weakness. The more fragile you feel, the greater the opportunity for His power to show up and carry you through when you pray. You are not ignored, you are not overlooked, you are not abandoned. Heaven hears you, God listens, and His Spirit moves on your behalf in ways you cannot see. Sometimes prayer brings immediate answers, sometimes it requires patience, but every time it deposits strength into your spirit. Even when the answer is delayed, the strength is delivered. Even when the situation looks unchanged, the heart within you is renewed. That is the life-changing nature of prayer. It does not depend on outward circumstances. It begins on the inside. It transforms you from the inside out. And then that transformation spills into every area of your life. Prayer teaches you to trust when you cannot trace, to stand when you feel like falling, to fight when you feel like surrendering. It reminds you that you are not alone, that the same God who spoke the universe into existence is the same God strengthening you in the quietness of your prayer. The greatest victories in life are often won on the battlefield of prayer before they are seen in reality. Prayer is where strategies are revealed, where peace is restored, where strength is poured out. It is in prayer that you learn that victory is not about avoiding weakness, but about allowing God's strength to fill your weakness. It is in prayer that your tears become weapons, your groans become intercession, your silence becomes trust. This connection is not fragile, it cannot be broken by distance, it cannot be severed by failure, it cannot be destroyed by doubt. As long as there is breath in your body, you can pray, and as long as you can pray, you can access the strength of God that transforms weakness into unstoppable power. Prayer has always been more than words spoken into the silence. It is more than a routine recitation or a string of phrases repeated out of tradition. Prayer is power, a living force that breaks chains, opens doors, and shifts the very atmosphere of your life. It is the unseen hammer that strikes against the walls of limitation, the spiritual key that turns the lock on closed opportunities, and the divine wind that changes the climate of your circumstances. When a believer engages in prayer with faith, they are not simply talking, they are activating the authority of heaven. The enemy trembles not because of who you are, but because of who hears you when you pray. Prayer is the battlefield where chains fall, where prisons open, and where victories are secured before they ever manifest in the natural realm. Life places chains on people. Chains of fear, chains of doubt, chains of addiction, chains of regret, chains of unforgiveness. These chains are not always visible to the eye, but they weigh on the spirit, they restrict movement, they suffocate potential. Prayer is the weapon that shatters those invisible chains. When Paul and Silas were locked in a Philippian jail, the scripture says they prayed and sang praises, and suddenly the prison shook, the doors flew open, and the chains fell off. That was not just history, it was revelation. It was a divine demonstration that prayer is not confined by walls, it is not bound by iron bars, it is not hindered by locks or guards. When you pray, you invite the power of God into the darkest prison of your life, and the chains that held you yesterday cannot hold you anymore. The enemy can try to bind your hands, but he cannot bind your voice. And when your voice rises in prayer, the atmosphere must shift. Prayer not only breaks chains, it opens doors that no man can shut. There are seasons when you have done all you know to do, when you have applied every skill, knocked on every door, pursued every opportunity, yet doors remain closed. That is when prayer becomes the divine key. It does not matter how many times man has said no when God decides to say yes. Prayer turns rejection into redirection, and it opens the right doors at the right time. Many times, God withholds certain doors because they are not for your good, but when prayer aligns your heart with His will, the right door swings wide open, and no power of darkness, no opinion of man, no plot of the enemy can stop what God has ordained. Doors of healing open, doors of provision open, doors of restoration open, doors of favor open, because prayer gives you access to the supernatural storehouse of heaven. The atmosphere of your life is also transformed when you pray. Atmosphere is not just the physical environment around you. It is the spiritual climate that governs how you think, how you feel, and how you respond. Some people live under atmospheres of heaviness, confusion, and oppression. You can walk into a room and feel the tension, sense the discouragement, breathe in the fear. But when prayer enters the room, the atmosphere shifts. Prayer fills the air with peace where there was anxiety, with joy where there was sadness, with hope where there was despair. It silences the noise of the enemy and releases the sound of heaven. Elijah prayed, and the heavens that were shut with drought opened with rain. That was not just about weather, that was about atmosphere. His prayer shifted the climate of a nation. Your prayer has the same authority, not only to shift your personal atmosphere, but also the atmosphere of your home, your family, your workplace, even your generation. Prayer is not about eloquence, it is about persistence. It is not the length of the words, but the strength of the faith behind them that makes chains break and doors open. Hannah prayed out of desperation, and God heard her groaning. Elijah prayed with intensity, and fire fell from heaven. Daniel prayed with consistency, and angelic intervention came to shut the mouths of lions. Each story testifies to one truth: prayer works, prayer breaks through, prayer shifts reality. When you pray, you are not begging a distant deity, you are communing with a present Father, and His ear is attentive to your cry. He does not just hear the words you say, He hears the weight behind them, the faith woven into them, the trust buried in them. Every whispered prayer carries power because it is directed to the one who holds all power. There are unseen battles happening in the spiritual realm that only prayer can affect. Chains are not always physical, doors are not always material, atmospheres are not always visible. Some chains exist in the mind, patterns of thinking that imprison the soul. Some doors exist in the spirit, pathways of opportunity that can only be opened by divine authority. Some atmospheres are generational, cycles of brokenness passed down through families. But when prayer rises, those mental chains break, those spiritual doors open, those generational atmospheres shift. The prayers you pray today are not only shaking the heavens for your life, they are paving the way for your children, your grandchildren, and generations you may never meet. The power of prayer is not confined to the moment. It echoes into eternity. The enemy fears a praying believer because he knows that prayer changes the balance of power. Without prayer, you are vulnerable, relying only on your own strength, but with prayer, you are fortified, clothed in the armor of God, backed by heavenly armies. Prayer does not mean you will never face opposition, but it guarantees that opposition cannot prevail. Prayer does not mean storms will not come, but it ensures the storm cannot drown you. Prayer does not mean doors will never close, but it assures that the right doors will always open. The enemy knows that if he can silence your prayer, he can weaken your strength. But as long as you keep praying, you keep shaking his plans, you keep breaking his assignments, you keep shifting the atmosphere to align with God's purposes. Prayer also aligns you with divine timing. Sometimes chains remain until the right moment, sometimes doors stay shut until the appointed season. Sometimes the atmosphere seems unchanged because God is preparing something greater. Prayer teaches you to wait without fainting, to trust without doubting, to stand without wavering. In the waiting, chains are already weakening, doors are already unlocking, atmospheres are already shifting, even if you cannot see it yet. Prayer sustains you in the tension between promise and fulfillment, giving you the strength to endure until manifestation arrives. It is the continual force that keeps heaven's agenda moving in your life, even when circumstances suggest nothing is happening. Every time you open your mouth to pray, you are participating in a divine transaction. You are surrendering human limitation in exchange for supernatural intervention. You are declaring that your battle is not yours alone, it belongs to the Lord. You are announcing to the powers of darkness that they cannot hold you, they cannot stop you, they cannot silence you. Chains are falling even as you pray, doors are opening even as you speak, atmospheres are shifting even as you cry out to God. Prayer is not passive, it is active, it is aggressive, it is powerful. It goes before you, it works within you, it follows after you. That is why prayer cannot be neglected, cannot be underestimated, cannot be ignored. It is the very force that breaks the invisible chains around your life, that opens the doors others said were shut forever, that shifts the atmosphere from defeat to victory, from despair to hope. From bondage to freedom. Prayer is more than a cry for help in moments of desperation. It is more than a ritual that eases the conscience. It is the sacred alignment of the human heart with the divine will of God. When you step into prayer, you are not simply bringing your requests. You are surrendering your perspective, your desires, and your limited understanding so that God's higher plan can be revealed in your life. Alignment is the essence of prayer's power, because without alignment, prayer becomes self-centered, but with alignment, prayer becomes transformational. To align your heart with God's will through prayer is to step into the flow of His purpose, to walk in rhythm with His Spirit, and to allow His divine agenda to shape your destiny. In that place of alignment, peace is released, purpose is revealed, and breakthrough manifests. There is a tension between what we want and what God wills. Humanity is filled with desires, ambitions, and plans, many of which may not be harmful, but are often short-sighted. We see only fragments, God sees the whole. We know what we want in the moment, but God knows what we need for eternity. Prayer is the bridge that closes the gap between our short vision and His eternal vision. It bends our will until it bows before His will, and in that submission we discover strength. Jesus Himself demonstrated this in Gethsemane when He prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." That was the prayer of alignment, the moment when human struggle surrendered to divine purpose. It was not easy, it was not without agony, but it was the doorway to destiny. Prayer does the same in our lives, breaking down resistance, softening pride, and guiding us into the center of God's perfect plan. When the heart aligns with God's will, peace begins to flow like a river. The world may still be chaotic, storms may still rage, circumstances may not instantly change, but the heart rests because it is no longer striving against God. Anxiety often comes from trying to control what is beyond our reach, but prayer teaches us to release control. Peace is not the absence of trouble, it is the presence of trust. In prayer, when you release your grip on outcomes and allow God to take the lead, peace settles over you. The burden lifts, not because the problem disappeared, but because you know the one who holds the solution is in control. That peace cannot be manufactured by human effort, it cannot be bought with wealth, it cannot be earned through achievement. It is the supernatural gift that flows only when the heart and the will are aligned with the purposes of God. Alignment through prayer also births purpose. Many live their lives chasing after goals, searching for meaning, yearning for fulfillment, but true purpose is never discovered apart from God's will. Prayer uncovers the blueprint of heaven for your life. As you commune with God, layers of confusion peel away and clarity begins to shine. Prayer opens your ears to hear His whispers. It sharpens your vision to see beyond the surface. It strengthens your spirit to pursue the calling He has placed upon you. The disciples prayed in the upper room, and when the Spirit came, they stepped into purpose. Paul prayed for direction, and God led him to Macedonia, changing the course of history. Hannah prayed, and her barren womb became the doorway for Samuel, a prophet who would anoint kings. Each of these moments reveals that prayer is not simply about asking. It is about aligning so that God's purpose can flow unhindered through your life break. Through is also the fruit of alignment. Many pray and feel as though the heavens are silent, but often it is not silence, it is process. Breakthrough comes when prayer moves from demanding our own way to embracing God's way. When you align with His will, doors open that no human could force, chains fall without you striving, opportunities emerge that you could never manufacture. The alignment itself becomes the key that unlocks breakthrough. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not the change in your situation, but the change in your heart that positions you to walk into blessing. The moment your spirit yields, the power of heaven is released. Breakthrough is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is subtle, a quiet shift, a small opening, a gradual release, but it is always transformative. It carries you from where you are to where God intended you to be, not by accident, but by divine orchestration. Alignment through prayer also protects you. Not every open door is from God. Not every opportunity is meant to be seized. Not every voice is meant to be followed. Without alignment, it is easy to step into traps disguised as blessings, to pursue paths that look good but lead to destruction. Prayer aligns your heart so that discernment increases, and you begin to recognize the difference between what is good and what is God. When you align in prayer, you no longer chase every option. You wait for divine instruction. This alignment shields you from wasted years, broken covenants, and unnecessary pain. It keeps your feet steady, your vision clear, your decisions wise. The enemy thrives on misalignment because confusion opens the door to defeat. But alignment shuts that door and secures your path in God's truth. The more you align in prayer, the more your desires transform. Prayer does not simply hand you what you want. It reshapes what you want until it reflects the will of God. Desires that once pulled you away from Him lose their grip, and desires that draw you closer begin to burn within you. This transformation of desire is the true evidence of alignment. David said, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." That verse does not mean God gives you everything you crave. It means He plants His desires inside your heart until what you long for is what He longs for. In that place, every prayer is powerful, every word carries weight, because you are no longer praying out of flesh, but out of spirit. When desires align, prayers align, and when prayers align, answers manifest. Alignment in prayer also produces endurance. Life's journey is long, filled with valleys and mountains, victories and setbacks. Without alignment, it is easy to grow weary, to faint under pressure, to give up in frustration. But prayer renews strength, it recharges faith, it revives hope. Those who align with God in prayer learn to wait without wasting, to fight without fear, to stand without faltering. Endurance is not natural, it is supernatural, and it flows from alignment with the eternal source of strength. Isaiah declared that those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength, mount up with wings like eagles, run and not grow weary, walk and not faint. That is the fruit of prayerful alignment. It carries you further than you could ever go on your own, even in suffering. Alignment gives meaning. Pain without purpose leads to despair, but pain aligned with God's will produces growth, maturity, and testimony. Prayer teaches you that even tears can water seeds of destiny, even losses can lead to greater gain, even waiting can prepare you for greater fulfillment. Alignment helps you see beyond the immediate to the eternal, beyond the temporary struggle to the lasting reward. In that place, suffering is no longer wasted, it is redeemed, and every season becomes part of a greater story written by the author of life. Prayer that aligns your heart with God's will is not always easy because it demands surrender. It means releasing control, letting go of selfish ambition, laying down personal agendas. But in that surrender, you find freedom. In that yielding, you find strength. In that alignment, you find life at its fullest. For when your heart beats in rhythm with the heart of God, peace flows without measure, purpose rises like the dawn, and breakthrough comes with unstoppable force.